America is not what it once was. I've got some bad news for people who don't travel internationally. The world hates us, okay? We're not the big dogs. We don't have the clout that we once had. We aren't even like statistically on top of anything, education or anything anymore. And I've traveled a lot internationally. Over COVID, obviously, I stopped. And there's always been an underlying tone that America is dangerous. But, you know, we run Hollywood, so a lot of the media that is consumed by people in other countries is still American. However, I'm on my first international trip since COVID, and it has gotten worse. I have heard from every nationality that America is dangerous, but I arrived in Indonesia, which is a country that, you know, a lot of people aim to get out of and go to America. And the first thing that my taxi driver says to me is that he's afraid of America because of all the poppy seeds that we're taking and all the jazz powder that people are using. And he's convinced that people are walking around the US like zombies, because that's what's on the internet. That's what these people are seeing. And I think it's a really big lesson if you are sheltered and are not leaving the US. We don't got it. Like, we don't got it anymore. People don't want to live in America. People aren't eager to live in America. When I was in Europe, a lot of the kids said their parents wouldn't let them go to America because they were afraid they were going to get popped by the police. Like, those are the fears. The only fear that Americans have when their children travel overseas is that they're going to be, like in the movie Taken, which is a very small possibility. And they just use that as a fear. I don't even, like, that's not really even a founded fear. People aren't taking Americans when we go, because you know how big of a hell case they would raise if some little white girl went missing? That's not what's happening. But what is happening is other people from other nations are going to America and bad things are happening to them. So, just a reminder, we ain't shit.
I mean, she's having a valid point that America sucks. But at the end of the day, people don't vote for politics. They vote for a better life. When that life doesn't get better, frustration is inevitable.
Curious on like Europeans' opinions on why they don't like Americans.
I'm an American that's been living in Amsterdam for about 8 years now. I'm completely integrated. My partner is Dutch, which is why I moved out here. I speak the language. I've got primarily Dutch friends. And here are some of the reasons why I have found that the Dutch, particularly, don't like American. So the Dutch mentality is all about nuchterheid is the word that they use, and it's about being down to earth. It's about being level-headed. It's about being just like everybody else. Nobody is better than anybody else. And if you look at the American mentality, it's completely the opposite. It's about trying to be better than everybody else, trying to be the star, trying your hardest to be something. They find that type of mentality completely rude, dishonest, and how they like to call it, fake. The second biggest reason is because Americans are brought up with the idea that America is better than everybody else, this savior complex that they saved everybody. They are the example, and that couldn't be further from the truth. If you look at things like gun control, healthcare, safety, equality, I mean, the US is the worst. Not admitting to that is something that they completely hate. And lastly, I don't know why, but there is this view that Americans are dumb. We are just dumb to them. I think that's something we're never going to be able to change. They're always just going to view the American mentality, the American mindset as just dumb. After 8 years living here, I can safely say that I totally agree with the Dutch mentality and I share their view on us Americans, sadly. As much as I love my American friends and my American family, I don't love my country, and I only saw freedom.
So everyone is the same in God's eyes. So why we think of ourselves as superior because we all are human. And that's the only reason need for equality. No black or white, no European, Asian, or Americans. We all are humans.
Here's a sample of what the rest of the world thinks of the United States. Green means you have a favorable opinion of the US, blue, unfavorable. A lot of these tie into current events, like Poland's sky-high 93% rating, which makes sense given our mutual support for Ukraine. The overall results will be a bit surprising to those of us who remember the 2000s and the unpopularity of the Iraq War. Today, nearly twice as many respondents have a favorable view of the US as an unfavorable view. But I think the result that's going to surprise Americans the most is just how unpopular we are in Australia, where nearly half the population has a negative view of the United States. And that's in direct contrast to how warmly Americans view Australia. If you take the two positive categories and combine them from this survey, Australia is the top country that Americans view favorably. What gives? Why do they dislike the US so much down under? I have some thoughts. Not only am I a historian and a policy geek, but I spent every summer of my teenage years traveling around Australia. And the first thing to remember is Australians all learned in history class that they spent the last century playing second fiddle to the imperial ambitions of their British colonial overlords and then on the behalf of America in Vietnam and the Gulf War. For example, one of the biggest blockbusters of the 1980s was the movie about the Battle of Gallipoli, starring none other than a young Hottie McToddy, Mel Gibson over here, where British officers callously threw Australian troops at prepared Turkish trenches. In the 1960s, Australians very much felt that once again, Australian troops were being sent, this time to Vietnam, to fight for the imperial ambitions, this time of America instead of Britain. The largest per capita anti-war protests in the world were actually in Australia. And so for many Australians in the 90s and the aughts, it felt like Australia was repeating that history all over again, this time in the Middle East. But the thing I actually heard the most as a teenager in Australia, especially in the 90s, was a sense that the US wasn't playing fair with Australian farmers. Now, you and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about agricultural policy, but it's a big deal in Australia. It is a net exporter of all kinds of agricultural goods, especially sheep. I remember sitting in a ute, a truck, with an Australian farmer who was just spitting mad at Bill Clinton for hypocritically lowering tariffs with Mexico and Canada as part of NAFTA, but raising tariffs on lamb exports from Australia. The US is used to getting its own way regardless of what anybody else thinks about it, but imperial entanglements and trade protectionism makes us enemies where we should be making friends.
That's it for today, guys. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more videos.